And as we go through these questions, the one thing I want everybody to remember is you're not just listening for the answer, you're observing the person. Your observation is as important as every single question you ask.
Did you push record?
Thanks so much for joining us on Second Act TV. Today I'm so happy to welcome back April Beyer to our program, relationship coach and the founder of Level Connections. April, thank you so much for joining me.
You are welcome. It's wonderful to be back.
Well, it was great having you here before, where we discussed the whole business of matchmaking, which is a big part of your history. You've been a fantastic, a very successful matchmaker, and out of all of your experience, you built Level Connections, which kind of bridges the gap, I think, between traditional matchmaking and dating in this, online world now. What I really want to talk about today, and you're such a great person to speak with because, well, you've been a matchmaker for over 20 years. You have got so much feedback off of first dates and how they went and what people want to find out. And you wrote an article actually about how to handle the first date, what questions to ask, and what people need to be ready for. Big topic here because a lot of people don't get past the first date. So let's talk about that. How do you prepare yourself for that first date and ask the right questions?
Well, I wrote that article because I wanted people to have just some point of reference. When you're really adept at this and you actually have the right framing and mindset about a date, you actually don't need this. But if you have those first date nerves, this is something that you can kind of look at ahead of time and just consider. Like anything, know the rules to break the rules, right? So you want to have an idea of what you want to know, but you shouldn't necessarily have this pre-fixed locked idea of what do I want to get out of this, and how can I qualify this person, because a lot of people go on their dates and the reason why they feel stagnant and not in the flow is that people are going on dates with a mission, and that mission to qualify the other person as to not waste time. And I say, if you're going to be on a date, enjoy yourself. Be there for that hour, for that 2 hours, whatever that is. And you can fill it with a lot more than just questions, but we'll start with the questions first.
Yeah. Well, you just brought up a good point is that and we say it on the show, you need to qualify, you need to know if this is right. But often that turns into a job interview, and that's what we want to, as you said, avoid at all costs. And I love the questions that you wrote in your blog. Let's start with the first one because this is great advice. So to find out if you have the same sense of humor, that's actually a very clever question you can ask, and what it does it tell you?
Sure, because a lot of people don't necessarily show up as funny on a first date. If you think about your life, whenever you're at your best and you're making the people in the room laugh, it's most likely because you're comfortable. These people are familiar to you, so you're letting yourself go. Think about a comedian, right? A comedian, unless they're really comfortable in their skin and they know who they are and their material, they're not going to be able to make us laugh in their audience. So it's not about, does this person make me laugh? It's, could I find out if there's humor there, even if there's not on the first date? So one of the questions I like to ask is, what's the movie that made you laugh the hardest, right? That just made you laugh deep in your belly. What movie was that? Because I think we can kind of get an idea of the type of sense of humor someone has, right? If they say, oh, I loved the movie The Jerk, or, a different kind of film, you can kind of understand sort of their intellect, what makes them laugh, right? If they have a silly side, and then you could explore that and start with that question.
Yeah, a great icebreaker. I
It's a
think.
great icebreaker. Yeah, because you're going to take somebody out of that nervousness. So instead of, we all have that inner critic sitting on our shoulder on a date. And instead of being with the other person, we've got this critic looking at us like, oh my gosh, am I answering it correctly? Do I look okay? Am I pretty enough? Am I handsome enough? Am I tall enough? This immediately gets you into the thought of that film, right? And the question isn't enough. And as we go through these questions, the one thing I want everybody to remember is you're not just listening for the answer. You're observing the person, right? If If all of a sudden that person gets a huge smile across their face, right? And they relax, that's when you can kind of pick up on other things about that person. Did they get nervous about that? Could they not think of anything? Did they immediately start grinning ear to ear? Your observation is as important as every single question you ask.
Great points. Great points. Yeah. So we broke the ice initially, and now we can get down to the more serious stuff. What we really want to know. For example, lots of women, to find out if he's loyal.
Mm, mm. Yeah, and unfortunately, people do the questioning that is not only um, harmful to the date, but it actually gives you a false positive. It gives you an answer that isn't necessarily the truth. If you put someone on the spot and ask, were you faithful in your marriage? Were they faithful to you? Did anybody cheat? It doesn't matter yet, right? Remember, you're on a first date.
Right.
You're not trying to get to know their relationship history as much as you're trying to get to know the quality and the character of the person. So, a lot of people lie because they don't want to be judged and they don't want to lose you, right? They're trying to still impress you. So, asking that question gets you nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
I say start with something that's more of a softball question that leads to loyalty characteristics like, who are you closest to in your life?
Hmm.
That could be his college or her college friend, or somebody at work, or their next door neighbor, or their brother, or their sister. You want to know, like, who are you closest to? Who do you spend the most time with? And who have you known the longest? And then when you find out about the longevity of those relationships, then you can learn more. Instead of hopping on to the next question, you can learn about, so what is it that brought you two together as friends? And why is the relationship still thriving today, 20, 30, 40 years later? What's going on with that, right? And then you learn, well, he was there for me when I was in my darkest hour, or, she helped me get back on track after my husband passed, or whatever that is, right? You learn what drives their loyalty by asking why they're still close to that person. That gives you a lot of information.
What a great point. For me, I know when I was dating, it was always important just if they had friends or if the ties to back to high school or college were always telling, and for all the reasons that you just said, is that there is a connection. There people want to be with this person. So that was a litmus test for me as well.
It's a danger when you meet people that don't have, you don't have to have a big circle of friends, but it's a danger to date people who don't have long-standing, close bonds. Because that means if they've been able to sustain and continue to grow a relationship over the years, and not just family, but like people that they don't have to love, you learn that they're actually working on those relationships. No relationship is accidental. They all require our nurturing, our care, our feeding, and our watering. And so if he or she is doing that, then you kind of get an indicator of, okay, this person will hang in with me too, because they work hard for their connections, right? It's important for them to stay connected.
Absolutely. Well, then another one, of course, is are we compatible? Do we have the potential to be compatible? How do you handle that?
I like the question of, what gets you out of bed in the morning? Like, especially on a weekend, what gets you out of bed? It's an easy question to answer. No one feels like they're being judged when they're asked, and you get an insight because most people will spend the first 45 minutes on work, responsibilities, right? Interests. Do you play tennis? I play tennis. Where do you work? This is where I work. That doesn't necessarily tell you you're compatible just because you have the same interests. But when that person has extra time, free time, extra resources, where does that go? Where do they spend that time? Because we all have to work, but when we're not working, when we're not tied to that responsibility, where are we putting our time, right? And so the compatibility is that lifestyle choice as opposed to interest, because there's a lot of people that don't make it who have the exact same interests. They get up at the same other morning and they go for a run, but they don't have the same morals and values. So I think this question of compatibility is begins with what gets you out of bed in the morning. So before you're going to ask somebody else, you better know this in yourself and understand where your additional time and resources go. What do you value the most in life?
Yeah, and
So,
as opposed to likes and dislikes, but I love it. I love it because right there, it's a much wider question than something that they might have already prepped for.
and the nice thing about these questions is that I call them builder questions.
Hmm.
Okay. You don't just stop there and think, okay, I got to go to question five. It's an opportunity to keep what I call like drilling for gold, right? You keep going on that. So if somebody says, oh, I've got two golden retrievers that get me out of bed on Saturdays and Sundays, and we go to the park and I throw a frisbee and it's just fun. I see the same people at the park every time. Like, oh, like, have you been friends with those people for a long time? Oh, yeah, we all get together on Sundays for barbecues. So you can see how it creates a thread for more information and more observation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I love it. I love it. Well, and then of course, is this person ready for a relationship, a serious relationship? We all want to know that.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, it's a lot of people say, how long have you been divorced, or how long has it been since your last relationship? And then they think, okay, it's been 5 years, they should be ready. That is also a question that leads nowhere. I've met people that were ready a year after divorce or separation, and I've met people that still weren't ready after a decade. So, what I look for is, what was the quality of your longest relationship, right? So, if they've been divorced for 5 years, 10 or 20, or whatever the response is, it's what was the longest relationship you've had, and what brought you together. So you want to know, like, what was the, not just what you broke you apart, but what was the thing that brought you guys together? And you want to find out if the person that was in their life, are they similar to you in any way? So you don't want to hear what happened to kill the relationship. You want to hear what was positive about it, what did work, because you're listening for the cues of, oh, that's me. So what did work in that relationship were these traits, and that makes that person smile, and I'm sitting there going, ah, check, 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 I'm those positive things. Or on the reverse, it's, ooh, those traits didn't work for this person, and I'm those things. So most likely. And to me, it's this neutrality. If they're ready for another relationship, it's the questions they're asking you, and it's also, are they in a place of neutrality, and there's space. You can tell that they're not like bogged down by life. Like they actually want to take on the responsibility of someone. Because aren't relationships all of us being responsible for each other? I mean, really, otherwise we're just dating.
Exactly.
And so you want to find out if this person feels the desire to be responsible for another human being, and not just about you in general, but like really in general, is there space and air and time and need to be connected to somebody? And those questions you can ask around that.
And that leads into the next important question, especially at this age: is he or she over their ex? In all likelihood, after 50, we're dealing with a divorce situation.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's interesting. For me, that is, how are you feeling now? I would first, instead of getting into the divorce, I would say, how's it going now? How are you feeling? Now, a lot of people steer clear from those questions because they've been told by other experts, stay away from the feeling questions. That's too personal.
Hmm.
That is not too personal to say, how are you feeling? And you got to wait for that answer. How are you doing now? You're not asking as a potential suitor or a potential woman that wants to be with this person. You're asking as a new friend, how you doing?
Hmm.
You've got to have the courage to sit back, just smile and look into that person's eyes and see what comes up. In those moments, that's when you hear the truth. That's when anger will come up,
Right.
frustration. If you see anger, if you see blame, if they start telling these stories where they feel tight, he's not over, right? To me, anger is attached to love. The angrier we are, the more we actually care about that person, which is why we're so devastated, because that person hurt us. If they're in more of that neutral space, right, where you can tell they've kind of Assumed responsibility. Yes, assumed responsibility of like he or she did this, but I also contributed and now I've done the work. You want to listen for those things. But it begins with how are you doing?
Yeah.
How are you feeling today? It's an open-ended question, and the reason why it's open-ended is because you want them to riff. You want them to start sharing about the concern that you are sitting there judging, qualifying them.
Yeah, such great advice, and a big takeaway here too is, don't ever talk badly about your ex on a first date because you will turn the other person off. It'll be telling for the person, but it's something that's not going to work for you. April, we're starting to come to the end of the segment. I want to go over one more.
Mm.
How to determine if you share the same values. To me, that is so important. Even if you don't have that initial spark, if the values are there, there's something to build on. So how do you determine if you have the same values?
Well, in my interviews and also when I was single and dating, I always started with childhood. That's where we learn our values, for better or worse, is our beginnings, our early, early days. And it's not, again, that we're judging people, but it is really insightful when you say, what was your childhood like? Tell me about growing up in your household. Tell me about when you were 5, 6, and 7. And again, that will tell you a lot of what you need to know. Does this person have the capacity to love you the way you are accustomed to loving? Will you guys have that foundation to build on for all the other things? I always say, shared values don't necessarily make a couple, but you can't have a couple without shared values.
I totally agree. Totally agree. April, we will link to all of your information there. There's a few more, great tips on questions to ask to get through that first date. And I say through because I think people do approach it like that. And it should be fun, as you said at the beginning. Let's make it fun. And by following some of this advice, even if you're hesitant to talk, if this is something that, makes you nervous, it is. These are great building questions. I will link, as I said, to all of your information. If you are looking for a relationship coach or a matchmaker, check out our other video. Check out April's information. You'd be lucky to work with her. And
Thank
is there anything else that you want to add, April, before we sign off?
Yeah, as far as these questions go, just enjoy and these questions will only land beautifully if you take your eye off of the outcome and just really enjoy receiving the information and not using them to qualify, but just to learn and grow and have an experience.
Perfect. Thank you so much, April. I look forward to having you back soon on Second Act TV.
Thank you, Silka.
If you haven't done so already, please be sure to subscribe to our channel. Just click on through to YouTube, and when you see the little bell right next to the subscribe button, hit that too, and we'll notify you every time we launch a new video. See you next time.